Hello, my friends. Welcome to 40 Days to PMP Exam Success. It's day 26, and we're talking about Process Domain Task 12, Manage Project Artifacts. Now, remember, this is the express version. This does not have all the questions, so we're getting straight into some content. Let's go ahead and listen. This is your buddy Phil here, Project Management Trainer and Coach. I hope you're doing well. Welcome to 40 Days to PMP Exam Success. Today we're talking about the topic of project artifacts. What exactly is an artifact in the world of project management? That's a good question to ask. When you hear people talk about artifacts, a lot of times it refers specifically to baselines, plans. It could even refer to some sort of record that is not necessarily a plan or a baseline, but is something that is managed by a project manager. For example, in the world of Scrum and Agile, one of our artifacts is continuously maintained. It's called a product backlog. The product backlog contains all of the stories or customer related requests that the customer wants. That is maintained all throughout the life of that agile endeavor. Now, in the world of predictive, our artifacts may include the project management plan or subplans in the project management plan. It may also include the baselines. It may also include some of those documents. When we talk about the documents of project management, those are on page 89 of the PMBOK Guide 6th edition. But when you really boil it down, in the 7th edition, we call these artifacts explicitly. We've got the section of methods, models, and artifacts. So in the 6th edition, we just say artifacts. But in the 6th edition, you find the language of outputs, inputs, documents, plans, baselines, and things of that nature. So for this one, we have some very specific tasks associated with that word, but today the one we're talking about again is all about managing project artifacts. And we have 3 enablers for this. So let's talk about these one by one. The first enabler is called determine the requirements. What, when, who, where, what, when, where, who, and so on. Just think about the 5 W's, the what, when, where, who, why, and the H, the how, right? So determine the requirements for the artifacts. That's the first one. The requirements for managing the project artifacts. The second one is validate that the project information is kept up to date. That is version control and accessible to all stakeholders. Now, there are a number of tasks associated with this, like I said, and one of the tasks has to do more with configuration management. That I have mentioned in the past. So we're not talking about that one today, but I want you to remember that version control is something that we've talked about in the past. Okay. In fact, when it comes to the concept of change management, we do talk about the aspect of configuration quite a bit. Okay. So again, validate that the project information is kept up to date. That's version control and accessible to all stakeholders, and continually assess the effectiveness of the management of the project artifacts. So when you boil it down, you need to know the requirements for the artifacts. If there are any peculiar requirements for those artifacts, we want to identify them. We want to validate that the information we have in those artifacts is kept up to date. Like I told you, some of the artifacts regularly change, like a product backlog. Also in the world of Agile, we have the sprint backlog. And the sprint backlog is used just for that iteration of sprint, but it is considered an artifact as well. And lastly, you want to ensure that your configuration management, your configuration control, your updates to those artifacts, you want to continuously assess. Okay? So that's the general mindset for this one. Okay? Very straightforward. You could think of it as a 3-step process, requirements, updates to those artifacts, and assessing the effectiveness continually. Okay? And that's pretty much it. It's a very straightforward task with very, very straightforward enablers. The only thing that I would add to this is to understand the word artifact could be used quite loosely in the world of Agile. So when we talk about Scrum, there are 3 roles: product owner, Scrum Master, and team. 5 events. People also call these ceremonies, right? We have the sprint itself, we have sprint planning, we have the daily Scrum, we have the sprint review, and we have the sprint retrospective. And then we have the 3 artifacts, and that's why you constantly hear me say 3-5-3 in Scrum, 3-5-3, because I'm talking about the 3 roles, 5 ceremonies, and the 3 artifacts are very important as well. And the 3 artifacts are the product backlog, the sprint backlog, and the potentially shippable increment, also called the increment or increment. Okay. And the increment is also an artifact. It's very specific in the world of Scrum. But beyond the world of Scrum, going into just general Agile, things like your burn charts, they could be called artifacts. And you do need to be aware of that for your exam. They very well could be called artifacts. Things like your cumulative flows, things like your product roadmap, your team charter. We could also refer to those in general Agile as artifacts. So any documents, any plans, records that are used, we could refer to them as artifacts. You could refer to a Kanban board as an artifact as well. A lot of times it is something like that you use for your product backlog anyway, right? Storyboards, story maps, all that stuff. Okay? I hope that gave you some context about this. As usual, we'll take a look at some questions. We'll take a look at some open-ended questions to get you in ship shape. And that will be it for the day. Okay, well, you heard it all. That's all for today, my friends. I hope you found value from it. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and share with your friends. When the open-ended questions are ready, you'll find a new version of this episode and all the other episodes on this channel. You'll find newer versions with questions on the Praizion channel. Take care and talk to you soon.